moi. Welcome to Disturbing Ideas. I'm Pat Boyle. Each week we present an idea that is indisputably true, but which is seldom discussed anywhere else because it makes some people uncomfortable. Tonight we discuss some of the questions raised about the Obamacare website. The big news of the day is, of course, that the Obamacare website doesn't work. The newscasters and Congress critters have indulged themselves in righteous indignation about the mistakes that the Obama administration has made. For example,
I said, there are thousands of websites that carry far more traffic. So I think that's really kind of a lame excuse. Amazon and eBay don't crash the week before Christmas, and Pro Flowers doesn't crash on Valentine's Day.
but is that the relevant analogy? Amazon and eBay are not government eligibility programs. They are e-commerce systems. How about the California EDD unemployment system, which is now almost 5 years late and $150 million over budget? Or how about the Air Force new ERP system, which was under development for 7 years and cost about $1 billion and is now being abandoned as a total loss? You would think that none of these people had ever read a book on software development. Yes, you would. Yes, you would. I, however, have read a lot of books on software development because that's what I used to do. I used to be a software development manager and executive in government, private industry, and as a solo practitioner. I threw out all of those books about a year ago, but there's one that I'd like to share with you, a statement from perhaps the most famous, the immortal classic, The Mythical Man Month. If a software development project is late, adding more personnel makes it later. Think about that when you hear all this tough talk about sending in the tiger teams to quickly fix things up. The history is that things aren't fixed up quickly. Let me recount a couple anecdotes. I was recruited to head up a California County Welfare Department's automation section in the 1980s. I wasn't paid very much, as I remember, but I had a lot of people working for me, almost 1,000. I was there for nearly 10 years. I was a part, not a real big part, but a part of a huge movement, a billion-dollar movement, to implement a uniform California-wide automated eligibility system for AFDC. That's public welfare, if you don't know. That effort had begun 10 years before I got there, and it continued for at least 10 years after I left. It never got implemented because AFDC was abandoned in the 90s when Newt Gingrich forced Bill Clinton into welfare reform. 30 years of development, nothing to show for it. So my personal experience with launching super large government entitled systems is that it takes decades, not weeks. But I had much the same experience in private industry. And around the turn of the century, many big private industries tried to modernize with ERP and CRM systems. That's enterprise resource management and customer relationship management. These are big systems that cost from $100,000 to $100 million to implement. Look them up on Wikipedia. Many, maybe most of these huge systems have been failures. How can that be, you think? In private industry, which does not have the terrible disadvantages that government has, you can hire the best people. You don't have to deal with the common corruption that you see in data processing in government systems. Well, I should know. I presided over or witnessed a couple such IT catastrophes. I was a very happy system development consultant for a big San Francisco startup, making a lot of money, and I had real good project progress. When one Friday, I was pressured into becoming a Siebel CRM project manager. I was told that I either took that job or I took a hike. I was an hourly consultant, so I had an hour's notice. That's how I came to be a Siebel implementation manager. I did that for about 6 months and I quit, got out. The whole Siebel project had been a fluke. The VP of marketing had had lunch with the VP of marketing from Siebel and they did a swap. 6 months later, it still wasn't in place, but they decided to abandon Siebel and put in SAP. Maybe there was another luncheon meeting. The really big horror stories in ERP are usually around SAP implementations. I shudder to think with that MIS team that I had developed, what happened to them? Then I went to another company to implement a couple IT projects, and I learned that they were also going to implement Lawson, another big enterprise software package. I went to the CEO because she was such a nice person, and I told her about these big packages. I told her that 90% of them never met their expectations, and maybe half never even worked at all. She looked puzzled. She said, "Didn't the software work?" She was in over her head. I gave her my best argument. I told her that the typical response to these kind of failures and problems on ERP systems was that the CEO got fired. I told her that. She didn't believe me. She didn't move me from the hardware projects I was doing to the big software project. But I, of course, was the only one that had any experience. Now, it was all bad experience because everything I'd ever touched had been a failure. But at least I had some experience. She didn't believe me. She kept me on the hardware projects. And about 2 months later, the board fired her because the software project was in deep, deep trouble, as they almost all are. Now, the Obama apologists and the just plain stupid people like to call this a website glitch. But it's probably much, much more serious than that. It's probably database or functional code problems, which are not solved overnight. If the past is prologue, then my guess is that we'll have men walking on Mars before the Obamacare website is working properly. Thank you for your attention. Please watch again next week.
Le soir au fond de